Hello everybody, welcome to a brand new video. This is a Ransomes Hahn LTD 500. I believe it's actually manufactured by Hahn and then it got imported into the UK by Ransomes, which is why it's called the Ransomes Hahn LTD 500. So yeah, not really seen many of these around in the UK, but obviously some have made it across here, thanks to Ransomes. And yeah, it's an interesting looking thing. Only problem is, it doesn't run. Somebody's had the engine out and, well, I have no idea what the situation is with it. It is a Model 19 Briggs & Stratton, which I think is about 7 horsepower, and it's not attached in any way, it's literally just balancing on the back of here. I've just placed it on, because somebody else removed it in the past. This is how I received it. So it needs to be either removed fully and then inspected, or I could bolt it down and then do a few tests. I suppose first of all, I'll just pull the pull cord. Well, it's not seized, but the recoil doesn't work, so I'm going to have to try and work that back in. So I think the best thing to do now is to take that top engine cover off, service the recoil assembly, and then if it's a functioning recoil, I can then conduct a compression test, which is going to tell us basically if the engine has good compression or not. If it does, then brilliant, but I still wouldn't really feel safe just running it, because I know that somebody has been doing things with the engine, attempting to fix it, and as I don't know what that thing was, it might have been internal, so we should probably take a look inside and make sure everything is good. You can just about make out the model number and date just there. That's the date code starting with 7, so it is the 19th of June 1974. So it's definitely worth getting this engine running. I do like these engines, they're very nice. We'll just check in the fuel tank. Yeah, a bit dirty, they always are. Have to get that cleaned out. Give it a quick flush through with some solvent. And yeah, then we'll have a look at the air filter, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, first of all, let's just get this top recoil cover removed and we'll get it all serviced. Yeah, these are very loose. A sign that somebody has already been in here. Of course, that's not a problem. It's just, as the issue wasn't fixed, I am still hunting for that issue. That one was missing, and this one is very loose. Probably just worked its way out. And this engine is my first task. I want to get this running, but there's no reason why the whole mower shouldn't function. Should be able to mow some grass with it. Okay, looks pretty clean. The usual rust. But yeah, that's very clean compared to some of the ones I've worked on. This is the carburettor. Just hanging on. The bolt is still there, but it's not actually in the thread. Also, this air vane should be straight, and it's bent to a 90 degree. So that's interesting. The coil is bolted down, it is tight, but as you can see it's got an absolutely massive air gap. So I'm guessing it's some form of ignition problem, maybe carburetor problem as well. But it's definitely not seized, and the connecting rod has not detached from the piston. The piston is moving, you can tell by the sounds, and the resistance on the flywheel. So that's all looking good. Back to the recoil, you can see the problem does seem to be here. It's very dry, very dirty, and it is just rubbing, it's catching. I really don't think it's too much of an issue. As for the starter clutch here, yeah, it's not amazing. If I can help it, I really don't want to be removing this assembly because it's very difficult to get the spring back in. I do remove the spring for my restorations, but it does take a while to refit it again. Just from personal experience, I'd say that these are probably the most difficult recoils to reassemble. Definitely not impossible though, far from it. So I'm just going to take one of these off at a time, and I'm going to clean them because they are really grubby, and hopefully that's going to make quite a difference. These 4 are all done. Now I'm just going to put some carb cleaner onto here. to give it a good clean, and then I'll give it some lubrication as well. Okay, that seems to have sorted it. Now to clean the clutch. Okay, so now very carefully I need to try and open up this clutch. Sometimes it is a bit tricky. Just got to get underneath it. There we go. So it wants to be very clean in here, certainly no rust, and it looks quite greasy, very rusty, and again quite gummy. It's gummy film on everything. Must be the oil. You do, however, oil the piece of felt in the top of here, which is actually filthy. That is so dirty and gummed up. So that's going to need some substantial cleaning. And what I tend to do with these is actually put them into the sandblaster. The sandblaster does clean this up quite well. Everything else can be cleaned in carburetor cleaner or a brake cleaner or some kind of solvent, but not this seal just here. Inside this ratchet mechanism we do have a piece of felt which is designed to be oiled so it doesn't bind to the shaft, and I'm going to clean this all up along with everything else. After sandblasting and cleaning everything in white spirit, it looks like there is a bit of a compatibility issue here, which might have been an issue which the previous owner was experiencing. Maybe they did this, maybe it's two different versions of this clutch put together, because this main ratchet mechanism with the lobes on doesn't seem to be the right one for the housing. There's always going to be a lobe in the wrong position. And there were actually a few versions of these. The early one just had the one lobe, but this is the 6th version, the 6th lobe one with 6 ball bearings, and yeah, it doesn't seem to be the same as this one. So you can see there's a notch for the balls to go into, whereas this one doesn't have this, and I believe the single lobe one did have this housing. So you can see we've got these indentation, which actually is quite common. This does happen. But this might be correct. It's just I've never seen this sort of in-between version before, and it's not working correctly. It keeps jamming. It's supposed to ratchet, and you can see this one here has got these recesses for the ball to lock into. So yeah, it's a bit of a mystery. It's like an old style housing with a newer style ratchet main piece just here. I will just reassemble it again, because I did reassemble it off camera and it just did not seem to function. Put the cover on with the seal. So it kind of works. It's very notchy. It's not right. If I show you this one, you'll see it ratchets nicely in that direction and it locks when you want it to lock in that direction. So yeah, mystery. So I'm going to use this clutch instead. Obviously I can swap some of the parts around so that one can go on there, clean things up, and yeah, in just a second it'll be ready to fit to the engine. Okay, so there we go, that's all cleaned up. I can now fit the top cover, and that is functioning correctly. Locks in this direction, clockwise, but it will quite freely turn in the opposite direction. So I just need to put a bit of oil in the top there. Need to soak the piece of felt. This can actually be done once it's been refitted to the engine, but I'll just do it now. So that will be absorbed Might just take a minute or so. And it's now ready to be put back onto the machine for testing. I will, however, be taking it off again so I can paint it once it's been removed again. This is just to see if the engine has got compression, so I can do a compression test. Because we'll also need to check the points of condenser and all that sort of stuff. Quick zap, and now for the recoil cover. Okay, let's give that a try. Obviously no spark plug, just to make sure it all works correctly. Well, the pull cord is recoiling fine, so that's very good. The clutch seems to be working, and the engine does turn over. So next up is the compression test. Make sure that's in there properly. Need a good tight seal. And then we have the gauge, which just plugs into here. And then we can take the reading from here. Well, very difficult to pull over. There might be an issue with the lobe on the camshaft, which basically just opens the intake valve slightly to make pulling the engine over easier. This is the easy spin starting system. So yeah, despite this, even if there is an issue with it, I have still managed to get quite a good reading. It looks like almost 100 psi. Yep, about, well, 92? About 92 psi. So that's pretty good. So obviously I need to delve deeper into this engine to discover what the problem is. The reason why the engine is hard to pull over could be the camshaft, like I said, the easy spin, or it could potentially be the valve clearances. So both of which will be looked at. But yeah, at least it's got compression. It's good that it's got compression, and you can't really get a very accurate reading with a compression tester on an engine which does have a compression release. Now, it's raining quite heavily outside now. I don't know how well you can hear it. Right, so anyway, back to the engine. I'm going to take it out of the mower again. I'm going to put it on the workbench, and we're going to take a look at various different things. The valves, and we're going to take the sump off, we're going to take a look at the camshaft, inspect everything inside. We might as well, we've got nothing to lose. Okay, let's first of all just remove the air filter box and the carburetor. The carburetor is sort of hanging off anyway, so this will be very simple to remove. Okay, so there's the air filter box. Looks like it does have the remains of an air filter in it. Oh wow. If you can hear me over the storm. Yeah, it's actually quite unusual to get storms here in the UK, well, this part of the UK. Yeah, that is just going to turn to dust. If I just get a pot, I'll show you how it crumbles. These are crumbly things. Quite amazing. So yeah, obviously it's going to have a new air filter, but that is the least of my worries. So it looks like an exhaust bolt has sheared off from just there. The exhaust is actually, well, the muffler is fairly rotten anyway, so maybe I can thread one into there. Okay, that bolt is, well, pretty much out, I think. Yep, there we go. It's got one more under here, and of course this one over here. It's very oily, and I actually get quite often on my videos people saying, why don't you clean the engine first? Why don't you pressure wash it first before you start working on it? Simple reason is I like to do it in the hot washer, not only because it's more effective, but also I don't like to pressure wash engines just outside and wash the oil into the ground. That's not good. Yes, if I do it in the hot washer, the oil can be dealt with responsibly. Okay, so that's that one reluctantly out. And then we have this one, and of course we've got the two linkages, the choke and the throttle. It looks like the fuel tap, the inlet is even sheared off. That's probably because somebody's dropped it. I've never seen one of those sheared off before. Right, so we've got the throttle and we've got the choke. And there is one very oily, greasy, horrible carburetor, which we'll take a look at once we've looked at everything else. Some more air filter just perched on the side here. So next up is this valve cover. And in here we'll be able to check the valve clearances. Okay, so a bit dirty. At the top we have the intake valve, and at the bottom we have the exhaust valve, both of which have different clearances. The intake is between 5 and 7 thousandths of an inch, and the exhaust is between 9 and 11 thousandths of an inch. So I'm just going to go in the middle for both of them. Starting with the intake, so what I'm going to do is make sure the exhaust valve is fully open, because that guarantees that the intake valve will be fully shut. So we should be able to take a reading here. Okay, so that's not too bad. We'll just put the largest allowable feeler gauge in, which is 7. Yeah, it's very good. So the intake is fine. Let's now check the exhaust valve. As you can see, everything is moving freely. So I'm going to go for 10 here. Okay, I can't get a 10 in, so it's a bit tight. I can go with 9. Yes, 9 is a bit of a struggle as well. So let's now find out exactly what it really is. Yeah, so it's 6, 7-ish, so that is way too tight. So to make the adjustment on this L-head or flathead engine, what has to happen is the head has to be removed, then the valve can be removed, and then I can make the adjustments by filing on the end of the valve stem. So yeah, obviously, well, the head was probably going to come off anyway, but since I know there's potentially more problems with this engine, I'm going to take the sump off. So let's take the fuel tank off first of all. Interesting way of putting these on. They normally go on the other way round. My understanding is this engine does not have any oil in it, but it's always going to be worth checking before I go and take the sump off and discover that it's got loads of oil in it. Yeah, oh, it looks really gunky actually. Some gumminess in there. A sign of things to come? Possibly. I think this is for the best. This is the issue when you don't know the history of an engine. I have no idea how this engine was maintained, although I am starting to get an idea. So this will be a spacer for the pulley block, which I actually do have. Yes, I haven't shown you yet, but I do have quite a lot of spare parts, which were given to me in a pot. So it's good to see that all this is still here, because I need the pulley block to be able to drive and mow with this. Hopefully I can get to the stage where I can drive and mow, but you just never know. Get these bolts removed. It's always worth checking to make sure they are all the same length. These do tend to be. Yep, all the same length. It looks like it's been glued on actually. Let's just see here. Maybe a bit of silicone. Ooh, look at that crankshaft. Wow! And yeah, silicone. So, first thing, the sump. Lots of sludge. Not uncommon though. But what I'm looking at is this plain bearing in here. It's supposed to be so smooth. And wow, that is rough. That is, it's like it's designed to be rough. There's always some oil left in there, so just put this oil absorbent mat under there whilst I dismantle it. First up we have the oil slinger and governor. Has two jobs. You can see the teeth on here. Looks to be okay. This part usually is. So that's good. Removing the camshaft is always so much easier if you align the timing marks. So you can see there is a, hopefully you can see there is a line on the timing gear on the crankshaft, and there is a dot on the camshaft. So let's take this out. The valve tappets will likely fall down. There they go. It is quite tricky to see, but this is the little bump on the intake lobe, which basically opens the valve slightly to relieve the pressure, to make it easier to pull the engine over. Just take these two valve tappets out of here. They seem okay. They don't tend to wear too much, these. And of course, the crankshaft with all of this extensive wear on here. I think it actually is gouged. I don't think it is just aluminium that's been smeared onto it. Some of it will be, but it does feel quite deep. But of course I can't take the crankshaft out because I haven't removed the flywheel yet. Let's get the flywheel removed, and then we can take the head off, and then we can take the piston out, and then finally the crankshaft. If I just tilt this forwards onto this absorbent mat, I should be able to get the rest of the oil out. Right, so we're now ready to remove this, and I know that you can use a pry bar and a hammer to remove it. In fact, I use that method myself with the very small engines like the Model 9, but with the bigger ones, or even just slightly bigger ones like this one, I think a puller is the best way. So I'm going to clean the threads so that I can get the bolts in for the puller. I found that if you don't clean the threads thoroughly, it makes it very difficult to get the bolts in, and if you don't get the bolts in far enough, you can actually put strain on the flywheel. You could crack it here. So it's always best to be able to very simply screw the bolts in all the way. Sometimes they do go with a bang. I'd say it's my least favourite part of working on engines. It's not too bad, but it can sometimes make you jump. Okay, yeah, it's quite a stuck one. Must be some rust. Yep. Got the flywheel key just inside here. Looks to be in good condition. Underneath this cover we have the points and condenser system, which runs through these wires to the ignition coil just here. I'm just going to remove the whole ignition system for now. We don't need it, and as you can see, this engine is just so grimy. It really, really wants to be rebuilt properly. And from what I've seen so far, it's a pretty bad engine. There's a point plunger just in here, and as the engine rotates there is a little bump on the crankshaft, and it will open and close this little lever for the points and condenser system. The plunger can wear, so it does need to be measured to make sure it's not excessively worn. Well, it doesn't get any better than that. An ignition coil mounted upside down, and wires which aren't even connected. Let's just feed this out of here. Yeah, I'll be putting either a used good coil on, or a new one. Now the head, let's see if we have any surprises in here. Hopefully not. I'm getting a bit bored of these surprises. On this side we do have the bracket for the fuel tank. As for the bolts, they're not all the same. There will be 3 different ones, and as you can see, this one here has got a washer on it. The 3 corner bolts, this one, and this one, will be longer than the rest of them. So let's just see if I can remove the entire head. Oh wow, you can see that somebody's been in here. Because that piston is spotless. So it hasn't run since somebody's been doing some work to it. The head is quite scratched, and there is some kind of chip just there, or crack maybe, I don't know. Yeah, there's some questionable things about this engine. Very interesting. From the very start I did want to look inside the engine, and really I had no choice. What is that? I think it's grease and maybe dusty dirt. Oh, maybe it's the old deteriorated air filter that's been sucked in, because this is the intake, and it's sort of melted and stuck around the outside of the valve, across the face of the valve. This engine has got many interesting features. You can also usually tell if somebody has removed the connecting rod before by looking at the locking tabs, and by the look of it, these locking tabs have been bent back and then hammered back into place. And now it's my turn to remove it. I was expecting just to fix a few things and then go and do some mowing. The grass is getting long, despite it being October. Very mild for October. It's been about 18 degrees Celsius. Don't know what date it'll be when I actually do mow the grass with this, but I might be mowing snow. Okay, so there is the big end split in half, the end cap. Bit of smearing. Oh, actually I can feel that with my fingernail. So yeah, a little bit of wear there. Just move that out of the way, and hopefully I'll be able to lift the piston out of the top. There we go. Right, so immediately you can see that the 3 rings, the gaps in the rings are very close together. They want to be evenly distributed, otherwise it can affect the compression. The piston itself does have some scratches on it. It's not the worst I've seen. I'll just lift the crankshaft out, and then we can inspect the bore. Yeah, so really it is just the PTO end, which is extensively scored and scratched, or gouged really, deep gouges. Looking inside the bore, there are some very deep gouges. They really don't look too good at all. That is the worst side, but the whole thing, all the way around it, is scratched. So really not healthy looking. So this engine has, at the very least, a worn camshaft, the plain bearing in the sump, a scratched bore. The connecting rod does have some wear on it as well. So I now have quite a predicament. What do I do? If I can source the parts, then obviously I'm doing it. But trying to find them is going to be tricky. Really, the sump needs to be replaced because that plain bearing is pressed right into there. Okay, so over the past few days I've been doing loads of research and I've drawn a blank in every direction. Every single part that I've looked up and researched, I've discovered that it's pretty much impossible to get hold of it, except for the sump. You can still buy the sump, but I don't want the sump because everything else is still awful. So this was my latest discovery. The valve seat for the exhaust valve just over here is not only extremely loose, but it is massively recessed. You can see that somebody has in the past been working on this. You can see they've used the punch method to try and keep this valve seat in the crankcase, but no, it's massively out of spec, and yeah, basically this crankcase is just ready to be thrown in the scrap bin. I am really determined though to get this engine running, but I will explain that the crankshaft obviously needs to be replaced with a used one. Can't get hold of them. It's not the standard crankshaft. This is the very stumpy crankshaft with a smaller diameter. So that's, well, I don't know how many machines it was fitted to, but it doesn't seem to be too many at all. So I can't get any kind of used stock for that. I have found this sump in my pile of spare parts, but it's also got a very worn plain bearing. It's not as bad though. It is still bad, which is why I replaced it in the first place, but it's an improvement. So I'm going to use that. And of course, yeah, we've still got lots of scoring in the bore, and we've got scoring on the connecting rod. The camshaft is worn. There's probably other problems that I've forgotten about because there's so many problems with it. But basically, I'm going to come to the conclusion that I'm going to try and get this engine running, and I'm not going to, put loads of money into this engine because it is well, it's for the scrap. It is for the scrap. It's rubbish. Really bad engine. Normally, I would get the parts that I need and I would rebuild the engine properly, all to the correct spec, and it'd be, a perfect engine at the end of it. This engine is so bad, and the fact that there's not really any solutions to this means that I am just going to do this as a proper will it run video. I'm going to reassemble it as it was, although I am going to sort out this valve seat as much as I can do, just basically stop it from spinning, make sure the valve clearances are okay, and then yeah, reassemble it, keep all the parts as they are, and then put it back in the machine and see if we can actually get it to run. As for the worn crankshaft, well, it's going into a worn sump, bearing in the sump, so yeah, it's not going to be damaging a decent part. Really, no more damage can occur. So, time to reassemble. As I said, please don't judge me on this. This is just me not giving up, basically, because really with this thing, it should just be thrown away. Let's just see if it can mow some grass in this condition. It's going to be interesting to see. Well, that is the valve seat in place again. There's not much material left around here to actually punch it back into position, and it's not spinning, but I'm sure once the engine starts to run, that's going to work loose again, because there's just not enough material to work with. Every time I punch it, a little bit chips off, because it's already been punched. As for the camshaft, it'll be fine. In fact, if anything, it'll probably make the engine run a bit better. It's only the starting which will be a bit trickier, especially at low idle. It'll probably run a lot smoother. Well, if it was a decent engine, it would run a lot smoother. Obviously, it's not a decent engine, so it probably won't even run. And if it does, it'll probably splutter like mad and backfire. Before fitting the piston, I thought it'd be a good idea to check the rings, and it's a good job I did, because we have the centering at the top, and not only that, it's also upside down. So yeah, so it couldn't be more wrong. The centering, the current centering, needs to go to the top, and it can be either way, it doesn't matter. Actually, I should have a piece of paper somewhere, let me just find it. Yeah, I tend to keep some of the old boxes, and they do include instructions. So as you can see, top ring is the same either way. Centre ring must be installed with the groove down, and currently, yes, it is on the top with the groove up. So that one needs to be changed over. Just remove that with the piston ring expander, and since I have removed this, I now put it into the bore, and I will just check the ring gap, make sure it's installed the correct way. And of course this is the centre ring, not the top ring. Just make that level using the piston. Now it does look like quite a big gap, so I'm going to start with 32. Yep, it's bigger than 32 thousandths of an inch, or thou. Let me just put a couple together. So this is 10 and 30, so we've got 40, and that actually is about right. Maybe 41. And for a compression ring, that, off the top of my head, is out of spec. I don't think it's horrifically out of spec, so we're going to reuse these, obviously. Just got to keep reminding myself this engine is awful. I'll check the top ring. I'm not going to take the oil ring off though. I already know it's going to be out of spec. Yeah, it's actually exactly the same. So they're both 40 to 42-ish. Had this been a proper rebuild, I would have certainly replaced these rings. That's the centre ring installed, and now for the top ring. There we go. So we'll put an even space between these gaps. Give ourselves the best chance possible. And yeah, I should probably just check everything else, make sure the clips are all in. They do seem to be. All looks good. So let's get it fitted. That is a very significant amount of play. There'll always be some play because it gets supported by the bearing and the sump on this end, but that is excessive. It's probably going to cause alignment problems. Right, so that is all of the internal parts of the engine put back together. A few things to point out: the valve spring which I initially fitted to the exhaust valve was the wrong one, so I swapped them over. It's another thing which was done incorrectly before. And also a head bolt has stripped out. It was already stripped out. It's just basically spinning, so it won't be a problem. Not for this, because it's scrap anyway. But anyway, onto the coil. As I showed you, the coil was, well, the wires were cut. Probably didn't work anyway. So I'm just going to fit a test coil. It's actually the electronic ignition one, so we don't need the points condenser. Part number 398811. So with this, in this kit, you do get the bung. See if I can get that to focus. Yeah, this bung goes where the points plunger was, just here. So if you are going to upgrade, you do need to bung it up. But I'm not going to for this because it's a waste of a bung. I'm going to be removing the coil again afterwards. So I'm just going to keep the plunger in here. Even if a bit of oil gets past, it doesn't matter. Not for this quick test, it might not even run. Also in the kit you do get a new flywheel key, which is nice. Just to clarify, if you are going to be doing this yourself, I do not advise putting the plunger back in. You are supposed to bung it up because the plunger will probably just work its way out, and then it will start to leak oil in this top cover, and then it will all run around the outside of the engine and get very disgusting. So yeah, you just hammer, well, you sort of just tap it in. You just tap the bung in. And now I can fit the flywheel. And then the key. And then we have a washer that goes on top of here. And then of course the starter recoil clutch. But first, I'll just fit the coil. And these coils do come with a very long HT lead. You are supposed to trim it. But again, as I said, this is for a test. It won't be actually fitted to this engine. So I'm going to have to just leave it long. And I really hope I'm not coming across as somebody who's just trying to not put effort in, because in all honesty, I would have loved to restore this fully and do a really proper job. But it's had it. It has had it. It's not worth doing anything to it. Well, it's not impossible actually. It's got so much wear that it just needs to be replaced. Okay, so that's holding the coil back. I can now turn it so the magnet is level with the contacts. Put this piece of card in that was included, and then when I loosen the two bolts, it'll move into position. There we go, it just snaps in. snug it up, and then remove the card. And that is the coil fitted. Of course, we do have the wire as well. This just clips onto the terminal on the underside, just in here. And you get given two wires. The engines are different. Some of them take just this bare wire that you clip in. The other one has to be bolted on. So you just snip off the one you don't need. So I'll just feed that down here for now. And I've just put the clutch on. And there we go. Next up, the carburetor. I've just been giving this a bit of a clean, just a quick clean with some carb spray. It's still got lots of grime on it. So I'm going to put it into the ultrasonic cleaner. That is, of course, if I don't discover anything too bad inside it. So let's just remove the bowl. I do have the full rebuild kit for this, so if it is good, then I'll be keeping the carburetor for another project. Okay, so a bit dirty, a bit gummy, pretty much what I expected. Certainly not worse than what I expected. And now we can remove the float. Just take this pin out. There is the needle valve. Actually, it's not too dirty at all. It's mostly just stale fuel and possibly some oil that's got into here. But there's no water. Just remove this nozzle. Okay, so again, gumminess. Just needs a really good clean. I think it is worth doing a decent job on the carburetor, because it looks like quite a rare one now, and yeah, it can be used on a good engine. And then we also have, from the top, another nozzle. This one is very long. I don't think this one is in the kit. Unless, of course, my kit is slightly older. I think they might have stopped putting this one in. And it's not cheap either. I think it's about £25. Right, so we just have the screw here. Get that removed. Doesn't look too bad. And we're now ready. Well, we've got the old bowl gasket. Oh, and the broken tap. I'll just replace this tap with a 90-degree fuel inlet. Should be able to pick the bowl gasket out of there. If there's anything left of it. Come on, bowl gasket. Yes, it's very deteriorated. Very brittle. But it's coming. In pieces. There we go. Good. So yeah, I'm going to get the ultrasonic cleaner warmed up. Many people ask me what I put in it. I just basically put washing up liquid, or dish soap as you may call it. It seems to work well. After a good clean, all of these parts have come out in pretty good condition, so I don't think I actually do need to use a new rebuild kit. I also gave the bowl a quick sandblast, and as you can see, that's come out quite nice. Much better than before. So yeah, I'm going to now reassemble it. The carburetor's on, the fuel tank's on, I've put a spark plug in, and also the air filter needs to be fitted. I've just got this cheap, actually it wasn't that cheap, it's non-genuine I should say, non-genuine air filter, which will be fine for this. If it was a good machine or a restoration project, I would definitely fit a genuine air filter. I always fit genuine parts to my restorations. And if I was keeping the air filter in a good engine, I would have put a thin film of oil on it just so it can trap more dirt. Okay, so the last thing is the muffler, and I was actually going to try and remove the stud, but as you can see, somebody's been there before me. It's filled with dirt, but yes, they have tried to drill it out and they've actually slipped off the stud and got into the aluminium. So I'm just going to put a threaded muffler in instead. I do actually have the original muffler, but it's in pretty bad condition. This is the actual muffler for the machine. It is the correct one, but as you can see, it's certainly seen better days. It is very weak, and I doubt it would do much muffling. So I'll put the engine into the machine now, and then we'll put the muffler on and see if it will fire. Obviously I need to put oil in, and fuel, but yeah, I don't want to be putting much fuel in, not to begin with. Okay, so I have fitted the engine to the machine, and I just pulled the pull cord and found out that we do not have any compression whatsoever. I have confirmed this with the compression tester, so this is almost certainly that dreaded exhaust valve and the exhaust valve seat. So before we actually did have compression, even though it was in the condition that it was in, I'm going to have to take the head off again. We're going to have to take a look at it, probably take the valve out. I'm going to do a quick leak down test just to confirm it is that exhaust valve, that exhaust seat. That's the piston at top dead centre. I'm now going to set the leak down tester, and then I can plug it in. So the leakage should be in the green, low. I have suspicions it's going to be in the red. Here we go. Yeah, that's definitely coming from the exhaust valve. I'll just put the microphone in front of the exhaust port. Well, I suppose we're lucky really. It's in moderate, just. Okay, that's enough of that. The question now, I suppose, is how far do I go with this? I've probably already gone too far. Oh, and I did put a new head gasket in after I recorded that clip of putting the head on. Okay, there it is. Yeah, it's not like the valve is stuck, it actually is opening and closing, so it's definitely the seat. So I didn't think you'd be too interested in watching it all being reassembled again, so I have just done that off camera. I've also tested it and I've managed to get 85 psi, so at least temporarily that problem is sorted. I've also just done a quick modification to a muffler that I had lying around. This is a deflector because the original exhaust pipe would take the fumes away from the operator, but obviously this one will basically fire them straight into their leg. Yes, although the exhaust pipe was mounted in the same place just here, it had a U-bend and it took the fumes to the back. I think the muffler was actually bolted to the back of the machine, and I'm having to use a threaded one, which obviously would fire the fumes this way, forwards. So I'm just going to put that on there and make sure I stop threading it in when we get to the point where the fumes are going to be directed sideways or outwards rather than up and down. Like sort of there. So they'll hit the plate and then just go either side. So before I put any petrol in, I'm just going to basically squirt a bit of carburetor spray into the carburetor and see if I can get it to fire. Got the right amount of oil in, so there shouldn't be any problems there. And if it does fire, it will just start and then stop immediately. It wants to go. I'm going to take it outside, put some petrol in and see if I can get it running, and if it does run I'll then fix the punctured wheel, the punctured tyre. I'll probably put an inner tube in, and then if we get that far I will see if it'll mow, but yeah, I don't want to get ahead of myself. And there we go. So it mows fantastically. If it had a decent engine on it, it would actually be a really good machine. But obviously, it's not a decent engine. We knew this. It was just, well, it's actually a miracle that it runs. I can't even believe that it does run, to be honest. The smoke was just inevitable. That was obvious when looking at the rings. And I didn't even check the oil ring. I didn't need to. It was so obvious it was going to be terrible. So, yeah, I think it's nice that I've been able to at least drive it. Just to show you how badly it was actually burning oil. If it wasn't obvious already, there's even oil getting past the head gasket, the new head gasket. And you can see the amount of soot on the muffler. But I'm very pleased that I did put that muffler modification on, because it did help. And for those of you who think it was disgusting, all that smoke, I agree. It will never be run again. This engine will now be used for parts, and well, this will probably have a decent engine put on it, because that deck is fantastic. It leaves a pretty good finish. It's a good rough cutter, and really, what more could you want from a mower? It mows the grass. So, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope you've enjoyed the video, and until the next one, see you again soon.